must prove the glories of his righteousness and wonders of his love and wonders of his love and wonders of his love and wonders of his love. Sing it joy to the world.
Well, let's see. Here we go. There we go. How's it going? Hope you're doing well. We are continuing our study, our Wednesday night study that we have been looking at over the last several weeks related to Judges. There you go. Right? Oop, right there. Right there. Judges. Chapter 13, verses 14 and 15 is what we're up to tonight. For this lesson here. One of the things that we have looked at and talked about over and over again is we just kind of continue to see a repetition. You know, the old saying is that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And don't we really see that in our own lives and also in the life of Israel? You know, just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and maybe this time it's going to be different. Well, look at what the Bible says, verse 1 of chapter 13. He says, "The Israelites again did what was evil in the Lord's sight, so the Lord handed them over to the Philistines for 40 years. So once again, we see Israel did the exact opposite of what they have been called to do, what God wanted for them to do, what God desired for them to do. And so because of that, the Bible says that God, because they did evil, because they turned away from the Lord, once again, God handed them over to the Philistines. This time it was for 40 years. And that's really probably, it's the longest actually recorded time that the Israelites were in bondage and under someone's rule. That we see so far. And so it says in verse 2, it says, there was a certain man from Zorah, from the family of Dan, whose name was Manoah. His wife was unable to conceive and had no children. The angel of the Lord came and appeared to the woman and said to her, although you are unable to conceive and have no children, you will conceive and give birth to a son. And now please be careful not to drink wine or beer or to eat anything unclean. For indeed you will conceive and give birth to a son, and he will never, or you must never cut his hair, because the boy will be a Nazarite to God from birth, and he will begin to save Israel from the power of the Philistines. When the woman went and told her husband, a man of God came to me. He looked like the awe-inspiring angel of God. I didn't ask him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name. He said to me, you will conceive and give birth to a son. Therefore, do not drink wine or beer, or do not eat anything unclean, because the boy will be a Nazarite to God from birth until the day of his death. So what we see here is that Israel has once again fallen away from the Lord. They've once again, and it's not just a falling away, it's a running away. It's God had nothing to do with this. This was all them. This was I know the direction, I know I'm walking with God, but I want something different. I value something more. And so that's what happened. And so the Philistines came in, and because of that, they ruled over for 40 years, the Bible says. Now, just kind of give you a little picture here. I'm going to try to see if we can blow this up here. I don't know if that makes any better or not, But one of the things that we see here is that, oh, there's my little mouse. Maybe you can see that little movement. I don't know. But right here, this is the area that we're talking about, right in this area. I don't know if you can see that mouse moving, but it's right in this area right here where you see the little flags and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the big picture, if you will. All right, now going a little bit closer, we see this area here. And so really the area that we're talking about here, and you think of Israel, here's the Dead Sea is over here. You see the Dead Sea right there, right there. All right, and so this is what we think of Israel. So this is the area of where the Philistines were from, or where the Philistines are, right up in here, up along by the sea. There we go. And so the Philistines were really, they were known as sea people. The 12th century BC, they migrated from Greece to Canaan, to that coastal area right there that you see. And the Jews weren't able to occupy that territory during the conquest of the land in Joshua chapter 13. One of the things you'll find is that these are sort of these cities you'll see mentioned here. Gaza. You've heard of the Gaza Strip? That's where we're talking about. Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, Ekron, the land between Israel's. This was the land between Israel's hill country and the coastal plain. It was called the Low Country. It separated the Philistines, or Philistia, from Israel. Today, if you think of Philistines, you may also think of Palestine. That's the same area. Simon was born, or rather, and so we see here that this is kind of the area what's taking place. And what's interesting is the Bible doesn't record, as we continue to look from verse 7 on down to verse 24. We don't really see where Israel calls out to the Lord and says, Father, we're under despair, we're under the rule of the Philistines. Oh, things are so bad. They don't say that. They've kind of gotten to the point where they're happy being enslaved. They're happy. Things they don't really want to rock the boat, if you will. Things are going pretty well for them. They're under slavery, but this is just sort of, it's become the status quo. We're just used to it, because they've been in slavery for so much because of their disobedience and their sin, that they've kind of just got to the point where they're just accepted. But the Bible says that God begins to raise up somebody, a judge, probably one of the most famous judges, really. I mean, he's had a movie made about him. Very famous judge, to be able to not deliver Israel, but begin the process of it. And that man's name is Samson. When we think of Samson, we immediately think of Samson and Delilah, right? But there's more to Samson than just the interaction with Delilah. In fact, the book of Judges dedicates 4 chapters. We'll look at 2 tonight, or for this study, and then we'll look the next 2 next time. And we're introduced to him. The name Samson actually means sunny, or the flickering, or sunny. And one of the things that's interesting is, as you think about that name, sunny, light. Light can also flicker, can it? It can bring about illumination, but then also it can flicker. And likewise, that's kind of a good description of Samson, is it not? Someone whose life flickered. He was someone whom God has called. He's set apart. We see this in the first verses 2 through 7, where God calls his family and says to his family, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to give birth to this child, and I want you to not, I don't want you to cut your hair. I want you to live like a Nazarite or a Nazarene, and before he's born, because that's what he's going to be. Usually to be a Nazarene was one who took a vow to God, was one who was set apart. And normally a Nazarene vow was for a particular period of time. It didn't last forever, but Samson's Nazarene vow lasted actually for his entire life. Um, and we see that here where we begin to see where his birth. And what's interesting is in verses 6 through 23, I didn't put this on the screen. You can read that on your own. But what takes place here is that as Manoah's wife comes home and says, "Hey, been met with by an angel of the Lord, a man who came and spoke to me, and here's what he has said. Here's the message." And Manoah's like, "Oh wow, okay, that's great, but I need to know more information. I need more details. I need to know the detail. I need to know a little bit more of what's going on." Um, and he said, so Lord, the verse 8 says he prayed to the Lord and said, "Lord, let the man come back, because I need to know some more information. I need him to teach me what I need to do. I need him to teach me how I'm going to raise this child." And God doesn't have to, but God sends back or brings back the person, the angel, for him to speak, the man. But it's interesting because whenever Manoah begins to talk to the man and talks to him, the man doesn't answer his questions. Rather, the man says, verse 12, it says, when your words are fulfilled, what is to be the rule of the boy's life and work?" He says, here's what you need to know. God's got this. You need to know, you want to know all these details, but God's the one who is taking care of this. God is the one who's doing this. And so Manoah says, "Okay, well, let me do a big meal for you. Let me show you respect. Let me show you honor." And he says, and the man says, "No, don't. Instead, take what you would give to me and give it to God as a burnt offering." And the Bible then says in verse 24, there we go. Verse 24. "So the woman gave birth to a son, named him Samson, and the boy grew, and the Lord blessed him." So here, finally, chapter 13 is kind of setting the stage, if you will, for Samson's life and what's about to take place and what's about to happen. And as he does so, the Bible says that God brought about the birth of Samson. As I mentioned earlier, the name Samson means sunny or brightness. Um, and any child brings joy and light into a family, but God had a more specific purpose for him, and that was to bring the light of the Lord into Israel, back into Israel. And he was to be a different person. He was to be set apart for a purpose. Um, there are several sections in as we begin to look at as chapter 14, where we begin to see kind of the story, the life of Samson. There are several stories that are mentioned here. There's the killing of the lion. There's the slaying of the 30 Philistines. There's catching the 300 foxes or jackals and tying the torches to their tails. There's breaking the bonds. There's the slaying of 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. It's carrying off the Gaza city gates in chapter 16, destroying the Philistine building or the temple there in verse 30 of chapter 16. Verse 24 of chapter 16 actually says that he did many more feats than those that were listed. And so Samson's life is a life that is both set aside and shows what God did great things through him. But Samson's life is also a testimony of Samson's faithlessness. It shows God being faithful, but Samson being faithless. At times he would play the role of the champion, and at other times he would be the fool. He would be the loner. He would be the one who just sort of wanted to do things his own way, kind of the I did it my way kind of idea. And so we see beginning in verse 14, chapter 14 of verse 1, where this kind of begins to take place. It says, "Samson went down to Timnah and saw a young Philistine woman there." Now again, back to our little map here. Let's see, where did we go here? There we go. I don't know what happened there. Let's go back to our little map here. There we go. And we see here on our map here, Timnah's right here. In this area right here. I don't know if you can see it right there, but it's kind of right there in the middle. All right. And so the Bible says that he went down to see this and he saw a Philistine woman. Now remember, Samson's not Philistine. Philistines were the bad folks. Philistines were those who had enslaved the people. So the Bible says he went back and told his father and his mother, I've seen a young Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get up, get her for me as a wife. In other words, he said, go get her. Father and mother said, but can't you find a young woman among your relatives or among any one of your people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistine for your wife? But Samson told his father, get her for me. She's the right one for me. Now his father and mother did not know this, but know this was from the Lord, who wanted the Philistines to provide an opportunity for confrontation. At that time, the Philistines were ruling Israel. So again, we see here that what takes place is that God brings into Samson's life a woman for him to fall in love with, or more likely, not necessarily love, but lust. He sees her, he wants to marry her. And this is going to be what God is going to use for Samson to be able to become a thorn in the flesh of the Philistines. Verse 5 tells us this. It says, Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother and came to the vineyard of Timnah. And suddenly a young lion came roaring at him, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, powerfully on him, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands. And he tore the young, as he might tear a young goat. And he did not tell his father and mother what he had done. So they're on their way, traveling down, and this lion comes out. And he rips the lion to shreds. But he doesn't tell anybody about it. Why? Well, then he spoke to the woman because then they went and spoke to the woman because she seemed right to Samson. After some time, when he returned to marry her, he left the road to see the lion's carcass. There was a swarm of bees and honeys in the carcass. And he scooped some honey out of his hands, ate it along, and went along. When he came to his father and mother, he gave them all that he had ate, gave some to them, and they ate. And he did not tell them that he had scooped the lion from the lion's carcass. Now, so here he's on his way, and he kills the lion, and then a little bit later he's going back to marry his wife, this woman, and he encounters the dead carcass where some bees had come and they had formed honey, and he's now desiring to have this honey and eat this honey because he knows how good it is, and so he breaks the law once again by touching something that was dead, which was unclean. So here he first begins with the lust of the eyes. He's lusting after this woman. He wants her for him. She's pretty. He wants her. Now has a lust of the eyes, or rather a lust of the flesh. Is what he sees here with the woman, and then lust of the eyes, where he sees the honey, and he says, "Oh, looks so good, and this is just going to make my day, and oh, I really need to have this." And so he violates again the law of the Lord. And then verse 10 says, his father went to visit the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there. And as the young men were accustomed to do, the Philistines saw him, and they brought 30 men to accompany him, and they all had a riddle. Samson said to them, let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to them, if you can explain it to me, and you can figure it out, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you can't, then you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. Tell me the riddle. Let's hear it. And he said to them, out of the eater comes something to eat, and out of the strong again something sweet. After 3 days, they were unable to explain the riddle. Now, I know what you're thinking. You already know the answer to this riddle, right? So the fourth day, Samson's wife persuades they say to Samson's wife, persuade your husband to give us the riddle, or we'll burn you and your father's family to death. Did you invite us here to rob us? So Samson's wife came weeping and said, you hate me, you don't love me, you told my people this riddle. He said, I haven't even explained it to my father or my mother. Why would I explain it to you? She wept the whole 7 days of the feast, and at last on the seventh day he explained it to her because she had nagged him to so much. Then she explained it to his people, and on the seventh day before sunset the men of the city said to him, "What is sweeter than the honey? What is stronger than a lion?" He said to them, "If you haven't plowed with my young goat, you wouldn't know my riddle now." And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and powerfully, and he went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 of their men, stripped them, and gave the clothes to those whom he had explained the riddle. Enraged, Samson returned to his father's house. So here he decides he's going to play a little trick. He's going to have some pride of life. So we have lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and now pride of life. The three sins that we see here, the big three. And we see here that what he does is he says, okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to pridefully, make fun of these guys. I'm going to steal from them. I'm going to take this, even though they're my honored guest at my wedding. I'm going to take advantage of them. And so what they do is they turn around and take advantage of Samson. His new wife comes and cries, and nags him. The Bible says to the point where he tells the story, tells the answer is the lion, and they tell him. So now he's obligated to pay and give them the reward of the linen, the 30 pieces of linen. So what does he do? He goes down to Ashkelon and he kills the Philistines, kills 30 Philistines, so that he could give their clothing to the people to whom he owed the debt. Verse 20, he and his wife was given to one of the men who had accompanied him. So in other words, he doesn't even get the woman. He doesn't even get the wife. It says in verse 20 that as they are leaving, if you will, after they have had this time, it says that the wife, after he lost his temper, it says that he went that he had went away, and the Philistine woman marries somebody else. It's interesting that Samson here, kills these men out of anger because he lost this bet that he made in a prideful situation and out of pride and the pride of life. We see that Samson was so angry that he didn't even spend time with his wife. He went straight back to his parents. He went back to Zorah. Zorah went back and left her. And so when we think of Samson, what we think of or what we see with Samson is a man whom God called, a man who God uses, but also a man who is full of faults, who fails, who stumbles, who falls. It's interesting when we think of Samson, we all think of him as being the strongest man ever. But yet his physical strength may have been outstanding, but his faith, the strength of his faith was lacking. But what's interesting to me about the story of Samson is this: God still used him. You see, God uses broken people. He uses people who fail, who fall, who stumble. Sometimes we think that, how could God use me? Look at how bad I am. But that's exactly the people that God uses. Why? Because then it's not about us. God uses us despite our failures because it's God who is doing the work, not us. Now you see here, next week we're going to continue to look at verses 15 and 16. So hope that you'll join us again next week as we continue to do so here and beginning to kind of wrap up the book of Judges. I also want to remind you that this coming Saturday, December the 5th at 5 o'clock, we're beginning a new Christmas tradition. And that new Christmas tradition is that we are going to be hosting a community Christmas tree lighting here at the church. Starts at 5 p.m. on Saturday, December 5th. Bring a chair. It's going to be all outside. Bring something to bundle up. I'm not sure what the weather's going to be like, but I know it's not supposed to rain. We're going to sing some Christmas carols, drink some hot chocolate, light the tree. We're going to also have some ornaments. If you'd like to put one on the tree, if you want to bring one and donate one, you're welcome to do so, but you will not get it back. So please keep that in mind. So don't bring your great, 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 great grandmother's heirloom, because we were like, we can't have that, because you won't get it back. And the other thing is, we want you to know too that we also have some. Andy Cross will be here doing some photos, family photos, for you to be able to take around the tree as well. That'll be free. So we hope that you'll join us this coming Saturday, December 5th, 5 p.m. in front of the church.